Detective Marcus Stone hadn't slept in 3 days, and the bourbon wasn't helping anymore. The neon sign from Wong's across the street cast an intermittent red glow through his office blinds, making the crime scene photos on his desk pulse like a wound that wouldn't heal. His new client's retainer, a thick envelope of crisp hundreds, sat unopened next to an ashtray full of regret. "Taking down a corrupt FBI agent," he muttered, rubbing his temples. "Sure, why the hell not? Not like I was planning on living forever anyway." The case had started like they all did, with a lie. A woman in an expensive suit had walked into his office on Tuesday, claiming to represent a government oversight committee. Her credentials checked out, but Stone had been in this game too long to trust anything that looked legitimate. 20 years on the force and another 5 as a private investigator had taught him that the prettier the package, the uglier the contents. "Agent James Morrison," she'd said, sliding a photo across his desk. "We have reason to believe he's been selling classified information. We need someone unofficial to look into it." Stone had seen that look before, the one that said there was more to the story than she was telling. But the money was good, and his landlord wasn't accepting excuses instead of rent anymore. "Why me?" he had asked. "Because you're like him," she'd replied. "Ex-cop, divorced, drinking problem, trust issues, but unlike him, you never lost your moral compass." Stone snorted at the memory. Moral compass. Right. That's what they called it when you couldn't be bought. When you turned down the envelope full of shut-up money and ended up working cases out of a one-room office instead of wearing a captain's badge. The first few days of surveillance had been textbook. Morrison lived alone, drove a car too expensive for his salary, and made regular visits to a warehouse in the industrial district. Standard corrupt cop behavior. But then, things got weird. Stone had followed Morrison to what should have been a routine black market meet. Instead, he watched the FBI agent disappear into a maintenance tunnel that, according to city records, hadn't existed since 1962. Stone had nearly broken his neck following him down there, using night vision gear that had cost him last month's rent. The tunnel stretched for miles, a maze of concrete and steel that predated the city above. But it was what he found at the end of those tunnels that changed everything. The technology wasn't human, couldn't be human. The surfaces were too smooth, the lights too alive, and the beings operating it. A sharp knock at his office door yanked Stone back to the present. He reached for his .45, then forced himself to relax. They wouldn't knock if they were here to kill him, probably. "Come in," he called out, sliding the crime scene photos into his desk drawer. The door opened, and Morrison himself walked in. The FBI agent looked exactly like his photo. Tall, clean-cut, the kind of face you'd trust with your secrets. That same face was now sporting a fresh bruise under the left eye. "Detective Stone," Morrison said, remaining standing. "We need to talk about what you saw." Stone leaned back in his chair, keeping his right hand near the drawer with his gun. "Sure. Let's talk about how the FBI is working with aliens to steal government secrets. That should be a fun conversation." Morrison's laugh was bitter. "Is that what you think is happening? That we're the bad guys here? Enlighten me. Those aliens you saw? They're refugees. They've been here since the Cold War, helping us protect ourselves from threats we weren't ready to face. The government's secrets being stolen? Those are actually counterintelligence operations against foreign powers trying to access their technology." Stone studied Morrison's face, looking for the telltale signs of a lie. He didn't find any, which worried him more than if he had. "And the black market operation?" "Cover story. We need to maintain plausible deniability. If anyone starts looking too closely, they find a corrupt FBI agent selling secrets. It's cleaner that way. Stone took a long moment to consider this. Why are you telling me this? Because in about 6 hours, a team of Russian operatives is going to try to breach the facility. They think they're raiding a standard black market operation. They're not ready for what they'll actually find down there. We need help. And your official backup is where exactly? Morrison's expression darkened. There's a leak. We don't know who we can trust. But you trust me? The washed-up PI you've never met? I trust that you've had 3 days to sell this story to every news outlet and government agency in the country, and you haven't. I trust that you followed me into those tunnels alone instead of bringing backup. And I trust that you're smart enough to realize that if we wanted you dead, we wouldn't have let you leave that facility. Stone picked up the envelope of cash his client had left and held it up. And her? CIA. She was testing both of us. I passed. So did you. Jesus, Stone muttered, reaching for his bourbon before remembering it was empty. I'm getting too old for this cloak and dagger bullshit. Are you in or not? Stone thought about his empty bottle, his empty bank account, and the empty years stretching behind him. Then he thought about the things he'd seen in those tunnels, wonders and terrors that would change everything if they ever came to light. Yeah, he said finally. I'm in, but I'm going to need better weapons than this 45 if we're going up against Russian operatives. Morrison smiled for the first time. We've got some gear you might like. Not standard issue. I bet you don't, Stone said, standing up. Lead the way. As they left the office, Stone glanced at the neon sign across the street. Its red glow seemed different now, less like a wound and more like a warning. The world had changed while he wasn't looking, become stranger and more dangerous than he'd imagined. But maybe that's what he'd been looking for all along. Something to believe in again, something worth fighting for. Even if that something came from another world entirely. The night swallowed them as they headed toward the tunnels, toward whatever waited in the darkness below. Stone couldn't help but smile. For the first time in years, he felt alive again. And somewhere beneath the city, ancient machines hummed with power, counting down to dawn. The alien technology made Stone's head hurt if he looked at it too long. The walls of their armory pulsed with an organic light that seemed to respond to their presence, brightening and dimming like a heartbeat. They call themselves the Vespers, Morrison explained, running his hand along what appeared to be a weapon rack. The devices there looked more like sculptures than guns. They arrived in 1962, during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Turns out our nuclear dick measuring contest caught the attention of some unfriendly neighbors. The Vespers came to help us prepare. Stone picked up one of the weapons. It felt warm in his hands, almost alive. Prepare for what? Morrison's face darkened. There are things out there that make our Cold War look like a kindergarten spat. The Vespers are political refugees from a conflict we can barely comprehend. They've been helping us build our defenses, but carefully. Too much, too fast, would destabilize our society. And the Russians? They found out about this facility 6 months ago. They think it's a black site storing advanced American weapons tech. They're not entirely wrong, but they don't understand what they're dealing with. If they breach the containment protocols... A klaxon cut him off. Red emergency lights began pulsing through the facility, accompanied by a low vibration that Stone felt in his teeth. They're early, Morrison cursed, grabbing equipment. Here's the crash course. That's a phase disruptor. Point and think about what you want to hit. Try not to think about anything else while using it, or things get messy. Messy how? Morrison just shook his head. Let's move. They ran through corridors that seemed to shift and change as they passed, the alien architecture responding to the threat. Stone could hear gunfire echoing from somewhere ahead. The sharp crack of human weapons mixed with sounds that made his skin crawl. They found the first bodies at Junction 7, 3 Russian operatives, their tactical gear still smoking. No visible wounds, but their faces were frozen in expressions of absolute terror. Vesper defense systems, Morrison explained grimly. Non-lethal, technically. They'll wake up in about 6 hours, probably wishing they hadn't. The next corridor opened into a vast chamber filled with terminals and floating holographic displays. Stone recognized it from his earlier surveillance, but now it was a battlefield. CIA agents, apparently there had been more than just his mysterious client, were exchanging fire with Russian operators from behind alien barricades that rippled like water with each impact. And above it all, floating serenely in the center of the chamber, was something that Stone's mind refused to properly process. The Vesper looked like a fold in reality itself, a being of light and geometry that hurt to look at directly. Down! Morrison tackled Stone as a burst of gunfire chewed through the space where they'd been standing. The phase disruptor hummed in Stone's hands, responding to his surge of adrenaline. Acting on instinct, Stone rolled to one knee and raised the weapon. He thought about stopping the Russian gunman, and reality hiccuped. The operative's weapon simply ceased to exist, along with most of his body armor. He dropped like a puppet with cut strings. Nice shot, Morrison grunted, returning fire with his own disruptor. But we've got bigger problems. They breached the containment field around the quantum core. If it destabilizes, Earth goes boom? More like reality gets a bit flexible, in a bad way. Stone saw his mysterious CIA client across the chamber, efficiently dropping Russians with what looked like standard human weapons. She caught his eye and tapped her wrist. Running out of time. The next few minutes were chaos. Stone lost track of how many shots he fired, how many times he ducked or rolled or cursed. The phase disruptor grew warmer in his hands, almost eager. He tried not to think about that too much. Finally, they fought their way to the quantum core, a pillar of impossible light that pulsed with warning patterns. Morrison immediately began working on the containment systems, while Stone and the CIA agent, her name, he learned, was Sarah Chen, covered him. "Why did you really recruit me?" Stone asked Chen between shots. She smiled grimly. "Because we needed someone who could see this and not break. Someone who'd already hit bottom and built themselves back up. The drinking, the divorce, the career implosion. They weren't marks against you. They were qualifications. That's either the nicest or meanest thing anyone's ever said to me. Job offer's real, by the way. We could use someone like you permanently." Before Stone could respond, Morrison shouted in triumph. The quantum core's pulsing stabilized, its light returning to a steady glow. The remaining Russian operators, seeing their mission had failed, began a fighting retreat toward the surface. In the aftermath, as federal cleanup crews disguised as hazmat teams swarmed the facility, Stone stood with Morrison and Chen, watching the Vesper float serenely above its restored systems. "So," Stone said, "about that job offer." Chen raised an eyebrow. "Having second thoughts?" "Just wondering if the benefits package includes bourbon." Morrison laughed. "Welcome to the team, Detective Stone. Hope you're ready to see how deep this rabbit hole really goes." Stone looked around at the alien chamber, the impossible technology, the hidden world he'd stumbled into. His old life of cheating spouses and insurance fraud seemed very far away. You know what? I think I am. Above them, the Vesper pulsed with what might have been approval, or amusement, or something humans had no word for yet. The quantum core hummed its eternal song, and somewhere in the city above, the sun was rising on a world that would never look quite the same to Marcus Stone again.